Hello, welcome to my channel. The first month of the year has gone, meaning it's time I've moved on to a newer journal. This time, pink covered. Of course, for my 2-page review spreads as usual, they do not follow the book's palette. If you watched my 2025 flip-through video, I did mention I still use the same journaling system for my 2026 fanfiction journal. So yeah, nothing much has changed, only the color palettes. And of course, newer unread fanfiction reviews. So without further ado, coming to this first fanfic I'm reviewing here, it's a 25-chapter fic titled Reputation, authored by Embersofapril. Took me a whole 2 days to finish it. This also marks as the first tick to my TBR list. Well, basically, this story is about Hermione's crusade into being the new Minister of Magic. Quite a movement she'd gone through. I must say, Cormac McLagan being a candidate campaigning against Hermione as the other choice for the minister was pretty convincing. I mean, canonly, his family is known for being big in the ministry. So, having been born into a political and pure-blooded family made his supposed transition quite expected. But how he kept reiterating that the country needed someone who can act fast rather than consulting books first was annoyingly laughable. It's like his only selling point. Truly, given the two options, Hermione Granger would always be the more deserving of the title. So of course, Cormac's only supporters were the people of pure blood. I mean, even Draco Malfoy said in a fic that Hermione was already doing the jobs of 10 ministers, which in this fic was true. Seeing all those achievements of hers, not sure if that's possibly viable though in reality. But really, Hermione had both the Malfoy matriarch and heir to thank for, having brought her campaign forward, what with those galas and all. And these are the first AI images I'm using for this fic. Moving to the other characters, I have to say, I wasn't too happy with Harry's and Ginny's characterization. They were lacking in many aspects. Then again, I've also always appreciated and loved a good Narcissa Malfoy. She was very supportive in this. Though I would have also preferred some commentary from Lucius via Azkaban. I mean, his thoughts about his son's endeavors with a would-be Minister of Magic. At the same time, I also wish Hermione's parents were involved somehow in the fic. I'm awarding this fic 3 stars, very well just above average. Oh, and by the way, I would usually indicate the index number that correlates with my reading log. And oh, the mysterious newspaper journalist. That was pretty obvious very early for me. Lavender Brown. Or Mrs. Ron Weasley. I mean, ever since Pansy mentioned casually that Lavender works in the same field with her, that was already a big hint from the start. Seriously, too many hints by the author on Lavender. I'd be amused if a reader say they're surprised by the reveal. Lavender was a bit of a copycat animagus, copying the idea from Rita Skeeter. My big tut-tut at the author here. Even her being bribed by Cormac to do a smear campaign at Hermione was not surprising. Lavender would have a field day writing nonsense about her old rival. I personally would have loved some sort of conversation between Ron and Dramione after seeing his wife Lavender being nationally defamed professionally like that. Well, in conclusion, writing-wise, I thought it was alright. Like I said earlier, just above average. I mean, the author did manage to put the plot through, but I didn't feel the zing in the story. Hence my 3 stars. Let's move on to the next fic. Now, the second fanfiction I'm reviewing is titled A Marriage of Inconvenience, a 33-chapter story written by Beforetherealbook. Now, I don't think I've ever done this very early on any of my videos, but go read this fic. I found this fic as an Instagram recommendation and was glad I took a chance with it. Took 4 days for me to complete the fic, but dang, it was very enjoyable. First and for all, Hermione. Gosh, Miss Hermione Granger. What a BEMF. Whoa. I literally had my mouth opened in shock when she gave Kingsley that flying middle finger kiss. Ha! Like, you go, girl! In a far contrast of character, Draco Malfoy in this fic is a very soft man. Such an A-star perfect husband. I love how persistent he was at proposing Hermione in Azkaban, even before that in the Muggle Hotel. I was honestly pitying him how Hermione basically used him to prove her point with the Ministry folks. But this simp man understood the agenda and allowed it, despite still honestly feeling the twinges of hurt at times. So, I love how Hermione almost always acknowledged that she's hurting him, but explained the neediness of why she had to use him. So both Draco and us readers were somewhat consoled by that. But Kingsley Shacklebolt was his usual, a stubborn dick. I had really feared he was going to have his revenge on a then pregnant Hermione. But dang, that man seriously needs to stop dictating people's lives. There are definitely other ways to repopulate a community than forcing pregnancy to women. AI generated pics for the fic. As for Molly Weasley, as much as I could see her standpoint as a mother, she was really cruel to both Dramione and Ron. Even seeing his intentions can be deemed canon, a loyal friend who's there to help. I felt him going behind Hermione's back and worked with Lucius and Kingsley was a bit out of character. I almost sighed a phrase, "A pureblood will always slither back to their own blood pool." But oh, I absolutely love both Draco's and Hermione's parents in this. Both loved how Draco naturally knew the right words to say to his Muggle in-laws, getting them to forgive and make amends with their daughter, even impressing Harry Potter who'd accompanied him to the Grangers. I enjoyed both the different reactions from both sides of parents to their child having a baby. Lucius, especially, was priceless. Seriously, I loved every time the Malfoy and the Granger parents got together, especially that second ultrasound session. Merlin, my god. Definitely my favorite scene. Oh, and I loved Granny Granger too. Glad how Lucius took a liking to her quickly. Perhaps because she too came from a noble family, albeit a Muggle one. Even the fact that both Dramioni's friends have grown familiar enough to address her as Granny Granger. But to be honest, I felt making the Grangers having noble blood was a bit far-fetched, even though it's explained that Granny Granger was basically disowned due to her marrying for love. I'm giving this fic 4 stars. Now, I know I too was shocked it only got 4 twinkling stars. But like I said, I score my stars according to the Corpal system. I honestly had thought it achieved 5 stars, given my generous scoring to all 7 categories. But I guess its drawback was the honest bit of OOC-ness I found in the characters. OOC-ness that is enjoyable, mind you, but still OOC. Anyway, Dr. Cocky Cock Cox. Can't blame Draco for being jealous and possessive there. He could acknowledge that this doctor is handsome, making him hate that the guy is touching his wife's privates. But I love the part where the nurse was bemused and possibly understanding when Draco slipped up calling the doctor by that nickname. Really, The entire pregnancy progress written was thorough, that one could really learn a lot just from reading this fanfiction. The Malfoy marital magic though, wow. Poor Draco. He had to go through more crazy heat than his ovulating wife. Must be so bothersome when all he wants to do is rot away. All in all, this whole fic is quite literally a family affair. So glad the Malfoys grew to adapt and love Hermione. Would have loved to see how their little star grew up in that loving household though. But seriously, a greatly written fanfiction. Strongly recommended by yours truly. I mean, I loved how the fic gives life lessons too, again and again, reminding readers that life isn't always as we planned, and that not everything is competition. But, like I said, to me, the main setback was that Draco canonly wouldn't have ever been that soft as portrayed in this fic. Despite, it gave me fluttering butterflies in my Shiba heart, and the other of my acceptance to the Granger's noble blood. That, as I said, was a bit too much for me. But overall, brilliant marriage law fic. Now, for those other fanfictions that I do not give 2-page spread reviews like earlier, I lay them out like this. A simple layout I've reused from my previous year's journal. And I actually used the Copal system to star rate my ratings. Thought I personally want an unbiased and thorough feedback from my, point of view. So, for you gatekeepers who are still watching this video now, I'll remind you that this is my journal. I do what I like with it. Time to place the pictures onto the placeholders. More AI generated photos. I really like having these pictures on my journal, so that I'll remember in the future what said fanfiction entailed. I mean, all the characters are as very much adults as we are, if not older by literal fact. I mean, you do know our golden trio are Gen X, right? Whereas most us Potterheads are millennials. But anyway, like traditional book reading journals, people use the book covers as the stars of their journals. But for me, it's these AI generated photos. third fic there, Great It Here One Shot, titled It Has to Be You, written by The Last Jedi. A very unique plot that's really enjoyable. Read it. Oh, by the way, those pink dots are for the index numbers, so I know where to refer to on my reading log. And this is my reading log. I'll color the index numbers of those fics that I previewed earlier, just in random pinks of my color palette. That's my favorite monthly quote by Pansy Parkinson from the earlier reviewed fic Reputation. Loved how casually she said it. I'm gonna use this unpeeled photo sticker and this pink washi tape. To make like a flap window, just for simple interactivity. I'll be using pie charts for my monthly statistics, along with this app called Trace Table. Basically, using my phone as a lightbox. I prefer using erasable friction pens to trace. Let's trace the sections. Listing down the tropes for this chart. Then color the segments with my pink color pencils. I'll finish off the charts by darkening the partitions lines. And I guess it's time for a flip through. And that's my DNFs for January. Yeah, just 6, which should be a good thing. My reading log. Gladly able to complete all 3 pages of my log for so many months now. That is 103 fanfictions per month. Even though yes, most of them being only one-chaptered. By the way, I have limited myself with only 2 2-page review spreads a month, lest the video would be even longer than it already is. I only choose long novel-length fics for my 2 pages reviews, one of which I try to derive from my TBRs. Well, I guess that's about it for this month's reads. I thank you all for watching up till here. Till then, happy reading and bye!